podcast from Drew and Mike is, I think it's really cool, and that is what I wanted to say.
Two and a mic. What follows is a talk I had with Parastu about an article she wrote for the Amnesty Journal. I have put all relevant links in the episode description. From my talks with Parastu beforehand, I knew that this conversation was going to be challenging. I was surprised just how challenging. When you hear Reyhaneh's story told by Parastu, you will be shocked and deeply saddened by the level of injustice this young, innocent woman was forced to endure. Injustice is, for there were more than one, that her mother, Shole, lives with and fights against every day of her life. I don't have words to convey what I feel about what Parastu recounts here. Each person should look inside themselves for their own way of dealing with this knowledge. There are any number of trigger warnings I should make you aware of before you listen to this episode. The topics cover execution, false imprisonment, violent abuse, and sexual abuse. May Reyhaneh rest in peace, and may her memory encourage every person everywhere to stay strong in the face of injustice. I'm so happy to say that I'm joined again by Parastu. We had a great chat the last time, and there's had a lot of positive responses as well, Parastu. So thank you very much for coming back to speak with me.
Thank you very much for having me again. It was a very great time, and I had a lot of great feedback too from friends. I'm very happy that you're giving me the platform to talk about Iran.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can also say from the experience that I've had with communicating with you and some of the people that you work with too, we always talk about such important, emotional, perhaps even sort of politically heavy topics. But what is really interesting is that in amongst that, your happy-go-lucky character comes out. Yeah, so as in people will have heard that we've talked about Iran, in the context of that exists at the moment. It's very serious, and what's happening is obviously tragic for lots of people. But that doesn't keep you down. And when there is an opportunity for joviality and having a bit of a giggle, you're one of the first to jump up. So that's always it changes the atmosphere. Do you know what I mean when we're talking about these kinds of topics?
Yeah, no, I can imagine that. I see that myself when I'm listening to someone talk about serious things, and I see them sometimes still giving like witty jokes or still trying to find the little humor in that. It just makes everything a bit more manageable and digestible, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's also a great way to sort of inspire younger people. I mean, you're obviously very young yourself, but I mean, to inspire other young people to come and participate, because you become immediately more approachable, don't you, as a character?
That's true. No, that's very true. Also, Aiden who was on your podcast, that's the same thing. And no matter the topic that you talk about, it's very fun to see that there's still many fun moments in that. That's very nice.
Yeah, Aiden is also one of those unique characters who, yeah, he has. You obviously have a very different vocabulary, shall we say, at least the way that you express yourselves. But yeah, he is also extremely entertaining. So yeah, all right. So let's jump into the topic for today then. But before the actual interview and the topic of Shole, this magazine that you write for, would you like to tell us a bit about the magazine?
Yeah, sure. So the Amnesty Journal, that's the name of the magazine, is Amnesty Germany's human rights magazine, and it is a very great magazine with a lot of journalistic integrity in there. And it's trying to, I mean, as an NGO, you always have platforms on which you communicate, and you have a different kind of language and communication on there because you're an NGO, and there are certain, especially as an NGO that has researchers and all these different kinds of levels that you go through to verify information. Then the Amnesty Journal is a kind of platform to give all those topics a more a more creative outlet too, and also a more approachable outlet, I think, because there are journalists that write in that, sometimes people like me who are not actually journalists, but who have had the luck to be asked to write for the magazine. And I've had the chance to really interview great human rights defenders and great personalities. And yeah, so the magazine is just a way for us not just to have the news. So if we hear about countries and we're hearing a person was executed there, or human rights abuses look like that in this country, then this journal is actually giving a face to these stories and giving that a bigger story, just for us to also have a deeper understanding of there's actual humans behind every number that we see, and there are actual humans behind every human rights abuse on our world. So that's why I'm a very big fan of the Amnesty Journal. Even if I hadn't written an article for them, I think I can only recommend it. I think you can also just you don't even have to become a member for Amnesty. You can just apply for it, or even read the articles online. So that's the way is very open for people to just read the articles. Yeah.
Cool. Okay, and obviously then we will include a link to the online version of the magazine, and thereafter people can find details for subscription, if indeed there is such a thing from that. So brilliant. Okay, we'll add that. Yeah. So obviously, because of your ethnic background, but also my interest within all things Middle East, but also particularly Iran, because I know so many people from that lovely country. There is a fascination for us to communicate and to learn more. So before we jump into this very tragic and trying story from Shole, well, what's the current situation in Iran?
So the current situation is, I think, a bit hard to describe. The very latest update that I can give is that yesterday, there was the 27th of Bahman in the Persian calendar. And the people in the country that had days before already said that day is going to be a day where people will be on the streets and protest more and show themselves, continuing to fight for this revolution. So they, because of the restrictions in the country and the internet access, a lot of people would write the dates on the walls everywhere. So there was a lot of offline communication to find people and to gather them. And I have personally only seen the videos from Iranian activists and from the diaspora who shared them. I haven't seen that much talked about in the traditional news here. But I mean, we have many other news too that we've been covering the last few weeks. So I do understand that, but it was very impressive for me to see how many people were still going on the streets, because there have been some people who might feel that the revolution has stopped, or it has stagnated, or it hasn't continued. But that, for me, again, was another sign to see, no, definitely not. People are still continuing to fight in many different ways. I also saw an activist, her name is Reyhaneh Jabbari. She posted something where she said, don't just focus on the people going to the streets. That's not the only form that people are protesting and are continuing this revolution. There are so many other ways. It's civil disobedience. We see that a lot. Women not wearing their hijab, taking it off, walking around. People, for example, university students, female and male, are not allowed to sit and have lunch with each other in the university campus, but many students still do that. So very many different ways that we might not see because it's not a super big newsworthy news. But they're still happening in the country. And if you want to find that information, you gotta find the activists, the diaspora, who are looking for that. And then also very interesting update. So last weekend, there was the 44th anniversary of the Islamic Revolution, which was a very big day. A lot happened inside and outside Iran. Myself, my mom and I, we were in Paris for the demonstration that was supposed to be a very big one again, gathering the whole diaspora. In the end, we were about, I think, 1,000 people. Many very great speakers were there. It was very well organized. But unfortunately, due to many reasons, I'm thinking, it just didn't gather the masses that it could have gathered. But what I found very fun to see was in Iran itself, there's also an act of civil disobedience, or an act of continuing the revolution. The regime had many festivities planned for that day, because it is a big day for them. And then you saw all these videos and pictures of empty streets, empty halls where they had planned to gather many people. And people had just not participated in a day, because it's not a joyous day for many people, and it's not a day to celebrate for everyone who's against the regime right now. So yeah, that is what I can give an update. What I've seen from yesterday was really throughout the whole country, people being on the streets, people shouting "Death to dictator," continuing to have all these chants that are really very direct and tell us everything that we need to know about the nature of the revolution. And the last thing that I'll say is the next update is on Monday. There will be another big demonstration in Brussels, gathering. I think it's a meeting of the foreign ministers, and the Iranian diaspora wants to meet there again and to demonstrate. And I've also heard that Masih Alinejad and Hamid Esmayoun, two names that you've heard probably a lot in the last few months, that they will be in Rome too next week, also for a big gathering. And they live in the United States or Canada, but they're coming to Italy also to probably have the people around them and to talk to them. So yeah, those are the updates I can give so far.
Wonderful. Good to hear that this people have to living in Europe, as I have always done. It's very easy to turn around and perhaps say, come on, why aren't they doing more, and so on. There is a very big difference between living in a country where you're openly allowed to go out, protest, and say whatever you want about the government without any fear of reprisals. And there is something very, very different about being in a situation where just by dancing with your partner, for example, that you can go to prison for 5 years. So whichever form the rebelliousness takes, that is still extremely courageous. And it has to be obviously recognized and respected for what it is. So yeah, I wish all of these people, particularly those who are protesting for the protection of their human rights and for a change to the current situation, I wish them all the best and good luck in that. Yeah, so that brings us to this interview with Shole Pakravan. Can you tell us about how that kind of came about and your feelings towards it as well?
So 2 months ago, I think, I was asked by a journalist working for the Amnesty Journal if I was interested in interviewing Shole Pakravan. And I will talk about her first. So Shole Pakravan is an Iranian. She was an actress, dramaturgist working in a theater, and she used to live in Iran until 2017. And 2007, her daughter was imprisoned. She was taken to jail, and they first didn't know what had happened. And then the story of her daughter continued that she had to stay in jail for 7 years, innocent until the very end. She at the end, in 2014, she was executed then, even though her mother and many people around the world and supporters, everyone had really protested against it, signed all the petitions, and people gathering around the prison where she was to protest the days of that she was supposed to be executed. So her mom, when that happened to her in 2014, she continued the work against the death penalty for 3 years in Iran itself, which is also very dangerous work. So anything that is even remotely activist, an activist nature, is deemed as an active dissident in Iran. And she worked there because she had seen so many horrible things in these 7 years of people who were either very innocent and just waiting to be executed, or many other living conditions in jails, because it's not just people that are supposed to be executed, but everyone else who's also in jails. Just the conditions there are very bad, and sometimes these people they end up in prison. There's just such unfortunate incidences. So she saw that, and during these 7 years, and that really sparked her and really gave her the energy, which I find very incredible. I cannot imagine that myself, to fight for these people. So she would do many things, giving the people who would leave jail, for example, the opportunity to start a new life, because it's already hard in many of our countries here, but in a country where there's really the justice system is wrong from start to end, and if you don't have wealth and you don't have a support system, the state is not there to support you. So she really, her work fighting against the death penalty, it has many very different facets. So she was a huge advocate for everyone there. And then after 3 years, she decided to leave Iran because she felt that she would probably be in prison too, continuing her work against the death penalty. So then she came to Germany, but she hasn't stopped. She definitely hasn't stopped her work and has been living here ever since. She is keeping the story of her daughter alive. That is, I think, her main goal. What I've gathered from the interview, that is her main goal, to continue telling the story of her daughter, to continue to tell the stories of the lives of the people in prisons in Iran. So yeah, so that was a long story. So I was asked to do that, and it was very important for me, definitely with my Iranian background too, and my heart just is very involved in every topic that has to do with Iran. So when they asked me, I first I knew that I wouldn't be able to travel back to Iran as long as the regime is there. So that was very sure for me, because I wanted to keep my name with the article together. I didn't want it to be anonymous. And talking to her, because she's also not allowed to go back to Iran. If she goes back to Iran, she will be imprisoned. So that was the decision. I talked with my family. They supported me. They knew that, you know, we are all together in this. We won't be traveling to Iran as long as the regime is there. That is the decision that we've taken. And then I met her. We talked about 2 hours. She told me everything in Farsi, and then ever since we've been in contact, because obviously she had in these 2 hours, I did have some questions planned, but I also wanted just for her to just be able to tell whatever she wants to say, because she's free to say whatever she wants to say. And yeah, so that was the interview that came about with Shole.
How did you feel about it personally? So you're obviously familiar with the distressing tale of her daughter, what happened, and about her fight for justice. And I mean, there are many countries that have the death penalty.
Yeah.
So there is this sense of barbarism whenever we talk about justice at the same time as thereafter the death penalty, because the belief structure is still such around the world that it's only for a higher power to make that decision of life and death, and it shouldn't be down to people of a more worldly presence, perhaps is the best way to say it. Emotionally, how is it for you to sort of step into the room, finally meet this lady who you've heard so much about? Also, were you nervous, that kind of thing?
So I was definitely nervous. I'm always nervous before interviewing someone, just because even though you read about people and you see their CV and you see their life, it's still so different to see those people. And it feels surreal to me if for example, I interviewed once a human rights defender who had been tortured and in prison and had gone through very horrible things. And that person was just sitting in front of me in an office building here at Amnesty, and was just talking about human rights work and everything I've gone to. And for me, that is just, it's crazy even after working for Amnesty for 3 years, to still see those people then in front of me and see them how courageous they are, and they continue to their work, and they're just, also laughing sometimes, also telling jokes. Is really, for me, I'm always trying to not see them just as these people that I admire and that I'm respecting them so much, but also as just human beings who don't want to be treated with the sense of like, oh my God, I don't want to say the wrong thing because you've been through horrible things. So with Shole was the same. I had heard her once speak in person a few weeks before that. She was in Berlin for the Human Rights Film Festival, and there was an Iranian movie shown against the death penalty too. I was talking about that topic, and she was part of the panel afterwards. And that was the first time I actually heard her speak. And I had to cry because the way that she, at the same time, I've never seen her cry, but there's so much emotionality obviously in her voice, because once your family member or your loved one has gone through that and they're just not on with you anymore, I cannot imagine that ever leaving you, and the pain always goes. She always talks about endless pain with every step of the death penalty, and you can see that when she talks about it. I'm imagining every time she tells the story about her daughter, she's reliving that again, and she has those emotions inside her. So that was very emotional to see. And then when we saw each other, it was the same thing, because in these 2 hours after talking with me, she also wanted to show me the audios that she had recorded from her daughter. When she had the opportunity to call her from prison, she would sometimes record these to have a voice, to also have what her daughter is saying, because there was all these legal processes going on. And she really wanted me to listen to that. And that was, I hadn't heard the Reyhaneh's voice before. And she showed me that. And also with the fact that it was, you can hear that it's an old telephone used in a jail, and then it's her voice talking to her mom. So that was very tough. But it's never about the journalist. It's never the person talking and sitting there. So I'm always trying as much as I can to take a step back and just let that person not, tell their story, and not for them to have to. If I start crying, then Shole would have to console me. So that wouldn't have been, that wouldn't have been good. But it was definitely very, very emotional to talk to her.
Yeah, I get your point. I think you're absolutely correct. The tragedy and the depth of the story is her experience and what happened with her daughter as well. Yeah. What's also important, though, at least as a secondary issue, and for me, because I know you, being able to report on these topics, and I also remember when I watched the movie Welcome to Sarajevo. Reporters, people talking about these tragic situations, they kind of go into autopilot. They don't always fully report the emotional situation or the emotional turmoil that they are experiencing at the time, but later on perhaps they reflect upon these, and that's when also they suffer sort of post-traumatic stress disorder, because they were just living without actually perhaps reflecting upon what was happening, but then afterwards it comes back and it hits them. And there is, even if you kind of manage to overcome that, the emotion of the moment, there is still a price to pay. It does come back at some point. And listening to that, I mean, I can't imagine what it must feel like to listen to the voice of somebody whose life was curtailed in such an evil manner. And it's like this sort of soul coming back from the dead to speak with you. I can imagine that must have been extremely difficult, and it must be for her mother.
Yeah, it is. I mean, at the same time, because in this case, especially with the other people that I had interviewed, they came from countries that I had known about, but I didn't have the emotional connection to as much as I have with Iran. And talking to her, and also obviously we shared a lot about the current situation, and also I also shared my views in that moment, because it was just a talk between two people. So that had a different level to that too, because we were both somehow from the same country, even though I never grew up there. And that just gave it a different dimension. I see her, Shole, as, because I'm still also in contact with her. I'll be at the Berlinale tomorrow to be there in case she needs someone to translate, because she does speak English and German, but in some instances she might just need someone to translate. So I'll be there, and she asked me before. So for me, she's like an aunt too that I've met now, a person that I look up to, because also she's the same age as my mom and my aunts. And she has this nature about him, because I also read when I was doing research on her, that whenever she sees a young girl and a young woman, she sees her daughter in that person. She can't help it, and I can imagine that's a very common thing that happens. So I think she has this very empathetic and also very comforting nature around her, which I find incredible, because I really cannot imagine continuing to not just only continue to live and go through everyday life, but then also to choose to advocate and be active, tell that story again. She has also written a book, which we're probably also going to talk about. That was released at the end of January. So this book now, it is out, it is published, and now she will be going on different, a little tour around Germany, and she will continue to talk about the story. And now the movie is out too, 7 Winters in Tehran at the Berlinale, which is a documentary movie about her daughter. And she will also be there at panels and speaking about it. So she really is just, in every instance, she's reliving that. But it's important for her, because for her, it's really important that that what happened to her daughter and what happened to Reyhaneh doesn't happen again, and doesn't happen to any other person, not in Iran, nowhere else. She really just wants the death penalty to be abolished completely. She doesn't even feel any kind of feeling of or maybe the bad people that are in Iran, the regime, or even the person that was responsible for the execution of her daughter. She doesn't even feel that sense of, okay, we can, I can have my revenge on them, but afterwards the death penalty stops. She's very consistent in saying that, no, the death penalty, I want it to completely be gone, because everyone who's involved in that, even the soldier that is there and has to go through the is forced to or obligated to that, because if they don't, then they have to continue doing their military service, or they have very bad conditions. So the young men who are a part of the executions in Iran, this is also trauma for them. They're not doing that and just not feeling anything afterwards. So in every instance, every human involved in that is feeling this pain, and she wants it to stop. And I can hear that, and I can see that in all her work and all the words that all the stories that she's telling us.
Yeah, it's just emotional to reflect upon upon that, and people who have loved as a parent loves, and then to have lost, that takes a heavy toll. But clearly it doesn't then take away the capacity to love. That will always remain with her. And it's an extension of that empathy and of that sense of love, which allows her to, as you say, sort of project the persona of her daughter onto other young girls that she sees. But at the same time, her love of humanity that allows her to be in the way that she is, to say, I don't want revenge upon those. And unbelievable. Okay, so the book, let's come to the book. Upon that book, the movie is based. Is that correct? Or the documentary is based? Or are they two different projects based upon her daughter?
So if I'm not mistaken, the person involved with the book, because the publication is in German, but Shole wrote the book in Farsi first. And that was a few years ago. She had already written that. And if I'm not mistaken, the person that is her publisher and the person that she worked with for the book is also the person involved with the movie. But I have to say, I have to be honest, I don't know of those projects, how intertwined they are. I haven't seen the movie yet. Tomorrow I'll just be there for the panel. But the story, the book and the movie, they just came about because when Reyhaneh was still alive and she was exchanging many letters with her mother, there was also, I think, in the last letter that they had exchanged, her daughter Reyhaneh asked of her there's a Persian saying that says to give me free to the wind, and has the meaning of let that person be free, let their soul be free, and continue. And Shole took that as meaning that she wants the story of her daughter to continue, and she wants that way the soul of her daughter to be free and to continue telling her story. So that's the main motivation, if I'm not mistaken, of how the book came about that Shole wrote. And she just really wanted to share that. The book is, I think she explained it to me, because I haven't read it yet. She explained it to me that it is written part from her view and part from the view of Reyhaneh, to show the life that Reyhaneh was living in prison and the life that Shole was living simultaneously outside of prison. And they were both working side by side on many different actions helping. Reyhaneh was just not in prison. She said herself, she lived a whole life in prison too, having these connections with the other inmates, learning about the life of these women, many of them who she wouldn't have met if she hadn't been in jail, because she came from I think, upper middle class family, and so very separated probably from any other class. And in the jail itself, Reyhaneh would advocate and also continue to tell her mom, oh, this is the story of this person, please tell the story about my friend here, and try to get her not to be executed, or try to get her freed earlier. So both of them, not just Shole, who's been doing that ever since, but Reyhaneh in these 7 years, she really, I cannot express my admiration for what she did in those 7 years. She really, she says lived the whole life in there. So that's how, 7 years, I cannot imagine 7 years is such a long time. There must have been so much that Shole still has on her brain, all these stories, everything else. So that's why the book and the movie, I think, came about, to not just only tell Reyhaneh's story, but also to, that way, through the story of Shole, talk about the situation of people waiting for their executions in Iran, and generally the nature of the death penalty.
Yeah, I mean, I'm obviously familiar with the death penalty because of well, essentially stories from the USA, and the movies that I've seen, and so on. But in all of those cases, even where there has been a clear miscarriage of justice, which is very much the case for a lot of the, especially black men on death row since the 50s, 60s, 70s, and so on. These are consequences of a trial of some sort. Whereas I kind of get the feeling that in Iran, especially people who were dissidents, there was no real trial. There wasn't really an opportunity for somebody to get up and say, actually, look, I'm innocent. All I did was this, and that should be my right to express this. That opportunity was perhaps not afforded all of those people. And I think this is a very clear distinction that we have to specify, that in these cases, these people are not tried along the lines of any process which we would consider to be just or fair.
That is very true, very accurate. Thinking about Reyhaneh's trial and her case, there, I mean, as you say, naming a justice system is already in itself like an oxymoron, because there is no justice there. But what happened in Iran, because there's so many laws that I find very confusing and inhumane. So in Iran, when you're in front of court, the person that the victim's family, the victim is not there anymore, the victim's family is given the chance to pardon the person that is being accused of whatever they're being accused of. So even in that instance, the family of Reyhaneh, maybe I should tell the story of Reyhaneh. So she had met a man who she thought was going to be a business meeting, and she was an architect, and that person said, oh yeah, I need someone to design my office, my building, or even apartment. And he invited her to go and see that space. And she, as a professional duty, said, okay, I'm coming to see that place. And this man had intended to rape her, and he had prepared anything, like a blanket, condoms were on the table, drinks and everything. So he had prepared this already, and she didn't want, she obviously didn't want that to happen, and she fought against it. And in that case, they were fighting, and the only thing that she could do was hurt him with the knife that was on the table, a very short Swiss knife. That was the only thing that she could do. In the end, she was able to, in that moment after hurting him, she was able to pound against the door and then leave the place. She called an ambulance. She came home. And that man died there in hospital. And then I'm not quite sure how it came about, but then the police, they came to Shole Pakravan's place in the middle of the night, took the daughter, and they said, like, yeah, if you just write that you bought the knife that was at this place, you have to write this confession, and then we'll continue to do that, and you'll get something, you'll get a sentence, but it'll be the end of it. And also, don't say that you were going to be raped, because this person, it turned out, he was from the military guard in Iran. So the nature of this turned political, because this man, they didn't want that nature to, they didn't want it to be revealed that he was going to rape her. And obviously the family didn't want this. They were saying that, oh, this is the defamation, our son would never do that. So in front of court, they had this case of the family not wanting to pardon her, only if she said that, she just lied about the rape allegations, and that was not the intention. And then they were unlucky because the first judge was very confused about the state of evidence. There was not much evidence. They were like, how is she supposed to have the Swiss knife? It's not that easy to get a Swiss knife in Iran. and also the police haven't really analyzed the scene, and there's so much information lacking. But then because of the political nature, the judge was changed, and that judge was clearly ahead of keeping the rape allegations at bay, really turning it into a story of this woman, she's crazy and she killed this man and she has to be executed. And Reyhaneh, she could have said, if she said, yeah, he didn't want to rape me, she wouldn't have been executed. But she wanted to stay true to herself and have this integrity and be like, no, that happened to me. This man wanted to do that. I am innocent, and this trial is a sham from start to end. So she stayed true to that until she was then unfortunately executed. And yeah, so the justice system in Iran, there's really either you have to be lucky. With the case of the judge, the first judge that there might have been a chance that Reyhaneh's story wouldn't have turned out the way it turned out, or you're just falling into that trap. You don't have enough money, and you don't have enough money to go out on bail, and then you just stay there, and it just is a vicious cycle that continues. So that is unfortunately the nature of the justice system in Iran.
I have no words. For someone to have been then the victim, not just once, but then twice, and so tragically at the same time. Yeah, I think anybody who listens to that story, who reads the book, who watches the documentary will formulate a certain kind of opinion. Yeah, I have no words, Parastu, for that. Shocking.
Yeah, it is very shocking, but at the same time, it is, as we see that, as Shole is showing us, she could have just, which is also very understandable, she could have just continued living having this grief in her and just live her life, and always just feel this pain and not do anything, or not do anything to turn that grief into something that is now so big. I mean, it's very understandable if someone doesn't, in Shole's situation, doesn't do what she's doing. That is very understandable. I would never think of even asking someone to, just continue turning grief into action. But if I always see Shole not giving up, and I see Shole who's gone through all that, continue to talk about it, because there's still so many people that might have the same fate as her daughter, that just gives me a lot of strength too, and a lot of conviction too, that we'll just not to become hopeless, and to fight for not just the regime to fall, but the whole justice system in Iran to just be started from fresh, and to give it the word justice has to mean something in Iran, and for now it doesn't mean anything there. So I'm very grateful. I'm very grateful for people like Shole who are continuing to talk about it, because if she weren't, and other people weren't telling these stories that they really don't have to say, because no one is asking anyone to tell a story full of grief. But she and everyone who's involved in that, making movies, not just the movie that is out now, but any movie that deals with topics like the death penalty, writing a book, continuing to talk about it, giving interviews. She even went to the convention against the World Congress against the death penalty, meeting many people from other countries that they still have the death penalty. So just on many different levels, to just give everyone who's outside of these countries also the picture, telling the stories, making it very important for us to know about it, and then also to take action. And I find that I'm very grateful for Shole too, that she is so willing to tell Reyhaneh's story. And it's like I call it life mission. I don't know if she called it, but for me, it seems like it's her biggest life mission, and she wants to continue doing that.
Yeah, wonderful. And it's her strength of character, I immeasurable, is what I can say about that. I find it extremely difficult to try to deal with the series of emotions that you're sort of retelling of that story has produced. So I can't imagine how it must also feel for you as a woman to have to also consider the fact that so many women are treated in this way everywhere in the world. We see it in every country, and this misogyny, this the sense that men feel that they can behave however they wish, this horror continues in such a way. I can't imagine what kind of feeling that must give to a lot of women. So strength to you all for your work, and also telling the story and facilitating the continuation of that story in every way that you do. So my compliments to you as well for that.
Thank you very much. I also wanted to say that we both wanted to have also Shole on the podcast, but because of her very busy schedule, because I also want to explain why I am telling the story and not Shole herself. So she's a very busy schedule, and also I think it might take many weeks before we might get to have her on the podcast. So I just wanted to give my experience of talking with her and writing the article. But obviously, I implore everyone to read up on Shole more outside of what I'm saying, because it's just my personal experience right now. But there's so much more that you can delve into. I think some letters are also published online that Reyhaneh or her mom were sending each other. And there's also the Human Rights Professor that I was talking about, the panel, the first time that I heard her speak. It's also on YouTube. So if anyone wants to hear these words and everything from Shole herself, I really, I can only recommend doing that, to just continue and hearing it from her. I mean, she also have this very melodic Persian accent when she speaks, and it gives everything that she's telling. Just you feel like you can understand every emotion that she's conveying, and you see yourself as part of this experience and the story too. So I can only recommend to listen to Shole herself, if people get the chance and have the time to do that.
Yeah, and please send me the links as well, and I'll add them all to the episode notes.
Yeah.
If in the future, when the tour and everything has been completed, and Shole does have time to speak with us, albeit in Farsi, then it would be a pleasure to, even if it's just for a few minutes, to have her speak and to hear her recant some of the work that she's doing.
Yeah.
Then that would be wonderful as well. Parastu, thank you very much. What can I say? You always leave an impression, and on this particular occasion, obviously the story is more than enough to leave its own impression. But for you to have delivered it in the way that you have as well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, I look forward to the next time.
Me too. I will be, obviously, I'll update you every week about the situation in Iran, and also there are many other topics that when you're talking, you just forget about many other stuff. But I'm looking forward to talking about every other development in Iran and that is happening, and that will be happening. And thank you very much again for having me, and for really just also feeling my my conviction, as you keep saying, that I continue to talk about it, and giving me the platform to blabber on and read and give on my monologues for a few minutes. Thank you very much.
It never feels like a monologue, to be honest. I have to say, I'm always very intrigued and enthralled when I listen to your, even if it's simply an update about what's happening and so on. You do communicate in this wonderful way that you do. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Two, and a mic. Two, and a mic.